Macon, Florida, growing manufacturing in the Sunshine State.
Okay, so let's go ahead. So, what's the time difference? I was wondering. It's about 12 hours? Or hold on a second, Paul. Are you in Australia? That's a big
Yeah,
question.
well, I'm in Adelaide, in Australia. It's 10:15 a.m. I believe it's evening for you, Pavel. So there's a
Yep.
decent time difference there.
You said 10:15 a.m.
Yeah, in the morning. So
Because we are
that's one of the
7:45
strange things
p.m.
about it's one of the strange things about South Australia also is that we're on a half hour difference to most other places. So it's usually an hour and a half or 3.5 hours
Oh,
difference.
that's why the half
So
hour. Like
yeah,
what?
yeah. So yeah, we're a little bit
I
different over
actually
here.
have a friend, and we are exactly 12 hours difference. And he's in Australia, up in the mountains. Which one is that? Perth. Perth.
Perth is on the west coast. Yeah.
Yeah, it's in the mountains, right? Like there is some elevation there.
We do have, so I was born in Perth. There are mountains, hills around Perth. Perth itself is pretty much at sea level, though.
Oh, okay, got it. It's just UFC goes there once every. I don't know if you watch UFC, but UFC goes there once every year, and usually the fighters complaining.
Okay.
It's always a spectacle when they go.
Yeah. No, I don't follow it, but
Okay, so so let's focus on lean.
yeah, sure.
So Paul, you're a program director, right, for Shinka management? Is that your
Yeah,
like
yeah. I'm
title?
one of the two directors and founders for the company, and
Oh,
as
okay. So you're one of the founders. I didn't know that. You're
no,
one of
no,
the
that's okay.
founders of the company.
Yeah, but
Okay.
I'm also a program director in terms of the programs that we run over in Japan. So the lean manufacturing focused study tours. Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, there's two of us that got Shinka started. My business partner and colleague, Ben Sparrow, prior to the existence of Shinka, he worked with the Japan Management Association, which is one of the really big names in Japan in terms of helping Japanese and global industry with Kaizen, productivity, quality, those types of topics. And my background's a little bit different. I'm an engineer. I did a big chunk of my engineering studies, so my master's and PhD I completed in Japan, and I'd been studying Japanese from a young age, and as had Ben. So there came a time around the what the Japanese called the Lehman shock, and the rest of us called the global financial crisis, where the Japanese Management Association decided to pull out of all of their overseas bases, including Australia, and that created an opportunity. So I was working as a civil engineer at the time, in a sort of systems optimization focused startup. But yeah, the opportunity came, and over a curry, I mentioned to Ben, "Look, Ben, you should really approach the JMA and ask for their blessing to continue doing what they have been doing in Australia." And his response was, "Well, I can't do it by myself." So we decided to create our own brand. We did get their blessing, and in fact, they were very generous in allowing us to employ one of their senior Japanese consultants for a year as well, to get started. I personally learned a lot from him, Yoshiaki. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun ever since. It all started with a focus just on Australia and New Zealand, but given that we're talking, obviously it's grown a little bit too.
Yep. No, that's amazing. So you said from young age you were learning Japanese. So I guess like your
Well, that
family was working
well
there,
that's
or
12. So in Australia, we have at most schools an obligation to learn language, a foreign language, for a number of years, not right through to graduation. But the choices that were presented to me at the time were French and Italian, but Japanese had just entered the curriculum as well, and we've already got a lot of very strong Italian speakers here in Australia, just given our past immigration policies. And French didn't really appeal to me. And I looked at Japanese and I thought, wow, this looks like some sort of alien code. I don't know if I'm holding it up, the right way or not. So I thought I'd have a challenge. And turns out I love the language, and love the culture as well. So I was very lucky to be at that place and time where it was just becoming available to us here in Australia.
Wow. No, it's like one thing, but you gotta take the opportunity as well, right? When it's presented to you, the challenge is to know and act, right? You gotta act quick.
Yeah,
That's
well,
what you did.
I was fortunate when I was younger that I think I had a bit of that about me. I remember getting to sort of year 11, year 12 here, and reflecting on how comfortable life is in Australia. And as an attempt to get myself out of my comfort zone, I decided to go and do a year of high school over in Japan, and then that's what sort of convinced me that I think there's a role for someone like me as a bridge between sort of Western culture and Japanese culture. I was always going to be an engineer. It's just the way I'm wired, and then that led to the confidence to sort of approach the Japanese government later on, and ask for that opportunity to do the masters and PhD over at Kyoto University, which was a fantastic opportunity and enabled me to get my language to a point where it's useful. And yeah.
So masters and PhDs, you do it in Japanese in the
Yeah.
university?
Yeah. So the coursework was in Japanese. The the thesis defense for masters and PhD was in Japanese. So at the PhD level, that's about an hour and a half of talking in front of an audience. The actual thesis itself, now this is a bit of a cop out. This is an excuse, but really writing the thesis in Japanese was not going to be much use to me moving forward, in a world that uses English as the main language. So I did write it in English, but the defense and all of the time spent at university was pretty much in Japanese. I actually had a bit of an advantage in that my fellow students, most of whom were Japanese, they were doing their research, you know, in English, being the language that most international journals are published in, and I could consume that information a lot quicker than them. So that I didn't realize it, but it did give me a bit of an advantage in that I could just read a lot quicker than them. But on the flip side, I had to be prepared to present whenever I gave a presentation in Japanese, which developed over time. And by the end of what ended up being 7 years living in Japan, it got to a point where it was suitable. So
Yep. No, makes sense. Wow. So what do you feel now? Which language? I mean, I guess you're really fluent in both of them, or
look, English is my native language. If I managed to start even just 5 or 6 years earlier, you get something in your head before the age of 7, and I'd be kick-ass fluent. I'm a fluent user of Japanese, but look, there is a gap between, say, my Japanese colleagues at Shinka Management and myself in terms of the ability to express myself in Japanese. But I use it. I do the interpreting on programs over in Japan, and quite happy going in and meeting with the companies that we have relationships with over in Japan, and feel very comfortable in the language. But you know what it's like. I believe you speak at least 3 languages, so there will be languages that you feel slightly better in than others. So.
but I mean, for me, I guess it's a little different story. For me now, English is really it's predominant, 100%. I've been speaking English all the time for the last, I don't know, 10 years. So for me, it was changing, right? So it from the 3 languages, Hebrew, Russian, and then obviously English, it was changing the predominant language. But now English just took over since I was in my 17, 18, when I started the university in Canada. Since then, it's all English, right? So, and
Look,
eventually
I shift between
English
them
took
very
over.
fluidly. So, you probably have the same experience when there are certain things you want to express and you can only do it in one language or the other. And some things I want to say that I can explain it in Japanese, but when I come to think about, well, what would the words be in English, it sometimes trips me up.
That's true. That's true. There is some of those specific kind of expressions, or more like a slang, right? How
Yeah.
can you explain it in one language as opposed to the next? you cannot, like, it wouldn't have the same punch, I guess, the same punchline.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's expressions that really they come from a cultural context that is very different. So, there's expressions such as "otskare sama deshita," which is, if you literally translated it, it would mean, something along the lines of "you poor tired person, you." But it's just a way of someone doing a greeting at the end of the workday to say, "Great job, see you tomorrow." But if you take these things literally, it sounds
Exactly.
a
It's
little
going
bit
to be
strange. And
very different.
yeah.
Great. So back to Shinka management. So you did some work in Japan in manufacturing, I would assume, in the industry.
Yeah, so look, across our team, we've got various different backgrounds. We've got the majority of our team, I'm not talking about myself personally, but the majority of our team have worked either in Japanese industry or for Japanese manufacturers abroad. So whether that be Toyota or Denso in the US, in Europe, and so forth. So for me personally, my experience in engineering, I came very close to accepting a job in Tokyo. It was an interesting interview process, and they offered me the salary package, and so, oh, that looks good. And they said, well, we've already factored in that you'll be doing at least 2 hours of overtime every day, and I sort of looked at the work life balance and also the opportunity for career advancement, and balance that with the idea that, look, if I didn't leave Japan when I chose to, I would probably have ended up living there permanently. So in my case, I chose not to work in a Japanese company. But there certainly has been, over the last 30 plus years, a lot of back and forth to Japan and working or partnering with Japanese companies. And now it's more the case that, we have a number of Japanese clients as well that we support. So that's where my experience of working with Japanese companies come from. I spent 6 years running the local chamber of commerce, focused on Japan, South Australia trade as well. So, a little bit like the role that you have with Florida Makes, I guess.
Yeah, I was
But
just
just with
about to say it's kind of
a
we are.
different focus, not a
Yeah,
productivity focus, but more a trade focus.
yeah. So all the chamber of commerce are, like, around Florida, are good partners of, depending which association is in the area. So
Yeah,
I represent two associations. One is Southwest Florida, one is Sarasota Manatee area. But obviously, we work very closely with the Chamber of Commerce in the different counties. So yes, that's exciting.
yeah. Actually, I should mention, you asked about the origins of Shinka, and it's probably worth just mentioning what the word means. So, when Ben and I got together and decided to do this, we wanted to firstly create a brand that had some reflection of the Japanese origins of what we were doing, and we didn't want to use the word Kaizen or something that was just very commonly used. And a word that really resonated with us was Shinka, which is it has a number of different meanings, but the word that I guess closely, or we felt strong about, was the meaning evolution, or to evolve, which is what we're trying to help companies do through Japanese management practices. So just to sort of throw that out there, that's where the name Shinka came from. Yeah. Yeah, more evolve, and it's really is a word that when you're in Japan and you're just listening to your environment, you hear it used a lot in the same way that you hear the word Kaizen used a lot. And when Japanese use the word Kaizen, they're not always necessarily referring to the manufacturing sort of continuous improvement application of Kaizen, but just improvement in general. Um, yeah, that's right. So yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean the Japanese expression that's equivalent to, there's room for improvement. The word Kaizen features in that, for example.
That's, like, I always want to ask this, but I don't know who I should ask this question. And now I think I have a perfect person in front of me, and I'm so it's just, it's just the thought came to my head. It wasn't like I didn't think about it before, but now
Sure.
it came at a perfect time. So, obviously World War II, rebuilding the country, and how much Edward Deming, Dr. Deming, had influence on all this way of life of continuous improvement? Is it strictly the Japanese culture, or Edward Deming had some influence?
Well, I mean, the influence, if you look at historical records, was huge. And as the story goes, Deming didn't really find an audience that was willing to take up his lessons, to the extent possible in the US and other locations. And then he found an audience that was looking for this type of thing, ready to take it on board, and probably had the need more than others. If you look at the situation that Japan finds itself in, really they're an island nation that has very little in the way of resources, and there's still very strong competition from their neighbors, whether it be China, South Korea, Southeast Asia, and other challenges around natural disasters and whatnot. And so they had to be very good at this value add part of things. Import raw materials, do something to them, get them out, and make their margin on it. And what Deming had to offer, I think, really fit with that need. There's a lot of respect for him in the country. When you go to conferences in Japan, usually, in the opening remarks, often someone will talk about the history of what led us to this, whether it's quality management or lean or whatever, and along with others, his name will often come up. So that it was a big influence, and the Japan Management Association would also point to his role as well.
So I guess it was just the culture, the way the Japanese are. It was just they were absorbing the knowledge rather than just it's not for us. We know better, or we don't have time for this. We are too busy. But the Japanese thinking, okay, that's actually going to help them, and especially
you mentioned World War II, and one of the things that the Japanese did very well, even after what's called the Meiji Restoration. There's a quite a famous period that was close to 200 years where Japan was completely shut, well, nearly completely shut to trade and influence from the rest of the world. There was, I think, maybe one port that there was some trading with the Dutch maybe at the time, but when they emerged from that and looked around, they saw that they were behind in quite a number of things. Whether it be technology, whether it be the way that warfare is waged, and so forth. And something the Japanese have been very, very good at from that period onwards is sending their people out, their very bright people out to the different countries to identify what are different countries good at and what can we learn from them. And they sometimes get a bad rap for it, and have in the past of, the Japanese have always been very good at copying things. And there probably was a time when they had to do that. There's also a time when they were, leading the world in many industries, and, and including technology. And boy, during World War II, did they have a few surprises up their sleeve? You know, there was a lot of dismissal of the capability of the Japanese up to the point of, say, the Pearl Harbor attack, to the point where they wouldn't, they may be able to do some damage, but we're not really at risk. And things like the Zero, the aircraft that was probably equivalent to or superior, I don't know, to I think what the US have at the time, Spitfires. Um, you know, so the Japanese have been really good at taking those lessons, learning, adopting, and then what we're talking about today, improving on it. So there's a bit of history there.
Absolutely. Actually, theory of constraints, Dr. Eli Goldratt, he for a long time, he said, I'm not ready to introduce theory of constraints to Japan, because he was afraid, because Japan was already at the time so much further ahead than the United States, manufacturing wise. So he said, if I introduce it to Japan too early, they'll just like there'll be no chance to catch them ever. So he only
That's
introduced it later, I think
that's
in
a
the
humble
early
approach.
2000s.
Yeah, it's it's interesting given that something I'm actually reading at the moment. Obviously, the goal is very famous, and I know you've been speaking with I think both his son and his daughter recently. Yeah, so but what I'm reading at the moment is actually the Japanese manga or comic book version. It's a 3-part series of the goal. So the Japanese have turned
There's
it
one
into a
here too,
comic.
yeah, in the States.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's a lot of fun. The way they've done it, the lessons are there. It's an easier way for some people in Japan maybe to approach some of the lessons there. And of course, the goal was became very popular partly because of the way it was written as a fictional story with lessons embedded in it.
Yeah,
And
but you can relate, right?
yeah,
You can relate to the
yeah,
to the
yeah.
main to the protagonist on the but in the book you can definitely relate. Like,
Well, yeah, that's right. The manufacturing manager that's under a lot of stress.
yeah,
um,
under a lot of stress, spending 12, 16 hours on his sleeps in the plant.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, so no, that's they're happy to take these ideas on board over in Japan, and it's really impressive to see that. In fact, something that has often surprised me in the last probably especially the last 15 years of being involved in specifically in sort of improvement methodologies is the vast majority of the Japanese that I come across that are involved in this don't actually realize how much value the rest of the world puts on the capability and know-how that exists in Japan in this area. Like, they're aware, oh yeah, we got this thing called the Toyota production system, and yeah, it's kind of good and it suits our needs. But as you know, and you've got a background possibly longer than mine in deploying lean. I think distribution and warehousing. You spent quite a bit of time.
Manufacturing and distribution, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and
supply chain.
and so about this admiration globally for what Toyota and a lot of Japanese companies have
Oh,
been able to
absolutely.
achieve.
Yep.
The Japanese just don't realize it. It's
Really.
yeah, it's
For them, it's just another like it's normal, right?
yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah, they
we
probably
had
think that they're not doing good enough.
yeah, we had two of your members join us in Japan a couple of weeks ago on one of our what we call the Lean Japan tour. And amongst that group, so we take up to 20 people, and amongst that group, we had a number from the US, Argentina, Brazil, Singapore, and so forth. But we had 8 people in the group from Amazon, and one of the Toyota suppliers we went to, he's a fantastic gentleman, and he has some great stories to tell about how he came to be involved in the Toyota production system. And frankly, it saved his life. I won't go into that unless we want to, but at the end of the visit, we took a group photo, and one of the members from Amazon came forward and offered his business card, and he looked at it, and he nearly fell over. He's like, "What has Amazon got to learn from us?" And like that's the sort of humility. And then but on the other side, the Amazon guys, as with the rest of the group, were were just amazed by this factory. And if you go into this factory without really understanding what it's about and just look at it, it's sort of a bit dark. There's a lot of real analog sort of manual approaches, and to look at it, you might not get it, but once you have this gentleman explain to you how they manage their operations, how they manage to do manufacturing in a sort of small lot high mix type environment without going out of business, and you see the application of the Toyota production system there, people are just amazed. And but they don't realize the secret sauce that they've got over there. So that's one of the pleasures of doing what we do, is being able to not just show the rest of the world what's going on in Japan, but also in a way, I mean, this sounds arrogant, but it's sort of giving a pat on the back to the Japanese to let them realize just they're being recognized. And certainly The operators and the sort of middle level managers really like seeing that when we come through their factories, and they just see that sort of admiration from the groups that come through. So
Yep. So you mentioned that two of our members. I mean, both of them are working for the same manufacturing company. But yes, they are members of our SRMA, our Southwest Florida Manufacturing Association. And I spoke to the president who attended, and he was blown away. He enjoyed the tour. He said he learned a lot. He already deploying some methodologies, and obviously he has a whole list of things he needs to do now in his facility. He's even mentioning the jacket. You know, that the jacket that they wear in just Japanese companies, like the managers wear the jacket, and
it's similar to this. It's called a
like something like that,
sojogi.
something like you're wearing, yeah.
Yeah, they're super handy. Apart from keeping, I mean, you know better than most, Pavel, but Japanese management is all about being at the gemba and getting your hands dirty. But you know, you don't want to get your shirt dirty and your clothes dirty. So these are really useful. You know, you got somewhere to put your pens, and yeah. So we all wear them. It's super not so necessary when you're having a chat like this, but when we then go out and visit our clients, it's just convenient. And on the flip side, wearing a suit jacket makes no sense in these environments. And
Exactly. Yeah, so even little things like that. But he said visual management is a big thing that he learned.
it's huge.
So that's what he's trying to implement in his facility.
Yeah.
So tell me about visual management or any other things that if we were to send or to tell our members here in Southwest Florida what are the benefits of the Lean Japan tour, what are they going to learn?
All right. Well, visual management is sort of one topic amongst many. Just to sort of take a step back, the whole focus of the tour is on sort of operations management, and from a lean manufacturing Kaizen perspective. And visual management falls into that. Now, one of the great things about visual management is it creates awareness amongst people. Um, the Japanese factory managers, but you know, also sort of middle level managers, their ideal for a manufacturing environment is that they are able to step 1 foot into that environment, basically into the factory, and immediately understand what the state of the operations are. Is it abnormal? Is it normal? If there is a problem, where is it? And you know, a lot of lean is sort of setting yourself up to understand where the problems are. You know, whether you want to call it waste or other issues, because until you've identified where these issues are, you can't do something about it. And that's sort of where Kaizen and improvement comes in. But you know, the first step is to actually be able to see what's happening, whether that's in a live environment or whether that's problems that occur over a period of time. And visual management is part of it. Now, that could be something as simple but powerful as a management board that is used, you know, a number of times a day for, you know, team huddles. You know, often the team manager or leader will go back to it and mark it up over the, you know, maybe even on an hourly basis. What is famous for having their team leaders go back and sort of mark up, you know, how many items, it might be a vehicle, should we have manufactured in this hour? How many did we? What's the difference? Why? What are we going to do about it? And, you know, it's no good thinking about that at the end of the shift because you're behind and you haven't been able to do anything about it. But just by doing that, it keeps them aware of what's going on. You know, if you go into a manufacturing environment in sort of, you know, a lot of other countries, and this has been my experience. It's the experience certainly of a lot of the senior Japanese that we work alongside. You know, they'll go in and they'll say they'll pull a team leader over or a supervisor and they'll say, what is the current state of production? And they might ask a specific question, and they'll say, oh, hold on a minute, I will find out. And they'll open a laptop and they'll search around for a couple of minutes and then they'll say, I'll be able to tell you tomorrow, or something like that. You know, it's not up here. Whereas visual management is keeping it up here. Now it works for the operators as well, because often this information about, you know, let's say again, productivity or production management production status is displayed on digital boards overhead. And you can see how many should we have done, how many have we done, what's our operational availability, or sort of a percentage as to how close to what we should have done have we done. If you're 100% being the ideal. And they're constantly aware of what's important. And, the typical important things are productivity, quality, and safety. And, you'd probably flip it in terms of importance: safety, quality, productivity. So there are things related to visual management that keep people constantly aware of those. And there have been many studies, including outside of industrial engineering, that have demonstrated the ability to improve things, metrics, KPIs, whatever it might be, just through raising awareness. One of the famous ones from a book I read a few years ago, actually, was it's kind of an interesting one. It came out of the UK, and it was one related to electricity usage. And you might recall this one, but they actually found that homeowners that had their electricity meter in the hallway on the ground floor, compared to those that had the electricity meter in the basement, were using far more electricity. So just the natural fact of walking past your electricity meter, it was like a 15 or 20% difference. I can't remember the exact number. Just by being aware, by seeing it, thinking about it, putting it in your head, they were more energy, they were more conservative with their use of energy. And that happens in manufacturing environments as well. It's huge in terms of safety. Japanese, when they go to work, if they're working for any sort of decent company in manufacturing, they will go through a green gate. It's called the safety gate. You've probably been through many of these yourself. And the gate has no magical properties, but what it does do is it reminds you, yes, I want to come out of here. I want my colleagues to come out of here, in the same state. And often alongside these, there'll be a mirror, and you walk in, you look at yourself, and what's the color of what's your complexion like today, and was I drinking too much last night? Am I dressed appropriately? Oh, did I remember my safety gloves or whatever it might be? There are these things there. There are times that I've explained these things, and a sort of tear has come to my eye, which makes it very hard to interpret when you're sort of crying up. But I remember one poster that we went past, and someone sort of said, what's this poster about? And it was, I'm going to do it again. It's partly because I've got a young daughter, and the poster is of this young Japanese girl waving, and she's using an expression. It's another expression that's hard to translate into English. It's "iterashai," which means go and come back. It's a way of her saying goodbye, Daddy. And it's just her way of saying, Daddy, I want to see you at the end of the shift. And I think about going to work and not coming back to see my daughter. These things around the environment help. So visual management is a lot deeper than this. It relates to topics like 5S, how you set things up so that you can always get access to the tools in the state that you need them. You can tell if something's missing and so forth. But I'm just giving a few examples here.
Exactly. I mean, visual management is critical, and especially you want to know if, like you said, the situation abnormal, normal, abnormal. But what you also want to see easily is the the product flow. If you're coming to a show production floor, whatever the industry is, and you see work in process everywhere, and there is mountains of inventory, how can you really see flow? So when you create stability in your production, and you use visual management to be able to see the flow, right? So even if a person is not from this company, but they're just visiting, if you have good visual management in place, you can see the flow of production, and and obviously, and you can tell, is it normal or abnormal? Are we green or red? But
an example would be our clients can see these problems when they go into Japanese manufacturing plants, not because the Japanese have more problems than we do, but they've just set it up to be obvious. And what you're talking about is, you might the standard amount of inventory that may be, or WIP that may be allowable next to line side might be just enough to fit in this little box that's labeled on the floor. If it spills out into the corridor and we find ourselves tripping over it, clearly there's a problem. And, we don't encounter that very frequently, but it's set up in a way that it's so obvious. Whereas, in so many other places, things are set up so that people can't see the problems because it would be embarrassing, and let's hide the problems, but then you don't have a chance of fixing them. So sorry, I cut you off, but yeah.
No, absolutely no problem. So tell me more about the Lean Japan tour. So what else? What is it about? I know we spoke a lot about things around it, Japan, but specifically the Lean Japan tour. I mean, obviously, if you're going to go and visit companies, but what else is it around it? Like one thing I heard is the connections you can make, but I want to hear from you.
Sure. Well, the origins of the tour came very much from, we're a consulting and training company. And our main goal is to be able to go in and help our clients implement a sustainable lean culture. That comes back to productivity, quality, and in the end, profitability. So in working with our clients in Australia and New Zealand, this is going back to the origins, just given that we had that connection with Japan, we wanted to create an opportunity for them to go over and see it for themselves, to understand it properly and to believe it. And that's where that came from. And the way we structure the week, and now we've had participants from over 70 countries now join us. So it's extended beyond Australia and New Zealand.
Hold on, did you say 70?
70, yeah. We've just updated the numbers on our website. The most recent countries were Tunisia. So we have a manufacturer from Tunisia that joined us, and Myanmar, a retail group, one of the largest retail groups from Myanmar, where we went over and we've done some consulting and training with them. So that ticked us over 70.
Did you have anyone from Florida before?
We have, in fact, we have one of our former regional managers who worked with us for a number of years in Chile is actually based in Florida as well now. So, yeah, I won't name names of companies. Yeah. Anyway, the way we structure it, what is it? It's 1 week. It's very intensive. We tell people to make sure that they tell their colleagues that they're not to be sort of bothered during the week with meetings and other things, because we don't have time for that. And we usually have everyone flying to Tokyo. We have some briefings, but the way we structure it is we have a mix of sort of classroom-based training. So we get everyone up to speed on the Japanese approach to the Toyota production system and lean, understanding some of the fundamental concepts that many people are familiar with. The idea of what waste is, how to identify it, how to eliminate it. The 5S visual management standard work, and then we go into some topics that people have heard about, but maybe couldn't really explain to you how to implement or what the role is. Things like Kanban, katakuri, the idea of how to efficiently use labor, how to track productivity and efficiency. So it's simple but very powerful stuff that we're teaching. And normally that teaching comes from one of our Japanese colleagues. So we have a number of very senior Japanese gentlemen, former factory managers from Toyota, that do the teaching from their perspective and their 30, 40 years experience in Toyota. And they teach that. Yeah, these are the senseis. Yeah. So we do that. So that's the hearing about it, but then we go and see. So we typically would visit, normally about 5 different factories, maybe a final assembly plant, maybe 1 or 2 Toyota suppliers, maybe 1 or 2 factories outside of Toyota. Occasionally we go to hospitals. Sometimes we go to government. Sometimes we look at more service orientated areas, and we mix it up a little bit too, depending on the mix of people that have registered when we can. We ran one last year that was entirely for the housing industry, so we went and saw a lot of prefabricated housing, and actually we included a housing industry related factory in this month's program that Um, no, it wasn't actually. If you mentioned, I don't know if you want to mention the name of the company that joined us, but they are from, they make shutters, and we actually went into a factory that makes shutters, and and windows and other components that go into houses. So they don't. Last year we did it a lot of prefabricated, but this one was more suppliers to the housing industry, including to prefabricated housing manufacturers. But sorry, I've digressed. So we go and see these factories. We meet with the management. So it's not just some sort of marketing tour that, there are a lot of public tours like that available in Japan, but we, honestly, we pay these companies so we can have the time with them. We can go and see what we want to see, and they make it very specific to operations management. And then we also have hands-on training. We go, we've got a training dojo where we test the guys that come. So the ladies and gentlemen that have been part of the program, we put them through some simulations. We give them a production line that they have to improve, and they have to go through the Kaizen steps as we've taught them. And actually, I'll mention his name. Well, goes by the name of Junior. This is the president that you mentioned that joined us. Him and one of his colleagues, who's the director of operations. They went through this particular exercise with us, and Jamie's comment at the end of it, he mentioned in the feedback survey, he said, that particular exercise at the time, I thought was, it struck me as being quite simple, and I wasn't quite sure about it. But when I looked back on the whole week, it was probably the most profound experience that I had. It was his words. In terms of what it teaches you, the need to understand the current state of operations, to actually follow the steps. Um, you know, his background, he worked many years for NASA. He's a very, very intelligent guy, very humble at the same time. And he's a bit like the rest of us engineers. He's got that tendency, and to look at something and think, I reckon I can solve that, and to jump to the solution. And in some cases that can work, but in lean and in Kaizen, you'll often find yourself getting to a far superior outcome if you're very clear at going through the current state analysis, identifying the individual issues, and sometimes you can use, the 7 wastes as a guide for that. And if you're very clear on this, there's this many seconds of walking, there's this many seconds of waiting. Clearly, there are items that are being transported in this environment that, that transport doesn't necessarily need to happen, and that contributes to this much waste. And when you build up a picture of all of the issues that you've got and you specify them, it leads you in a different direction, and it also helps you. It's a common occurrence, and I don't mean to spoil this for those that, those of your members that might join us in the future. But it's a common occurrence for people to get to a point where they make an improvement,
Don't
they
give
pat
away too
themselves
much.
on the back, they high five each other, and then they're not even close to where they could be. And so it's when they get to the end and they go, "Wow, we didn't look at it from that perspective." That there's a number of ahas, and they do really find that that sort of profound experience that they go through. So it ties everything together. So in summary, you hear, you go and see, you do, and that's sort of our approach to helping people develop their capability with life.
Well, that's really the best way of learning. I mean, you can't just, just lots of theory, but no practice. You got to do some actual hands-on practice
It's a
exercises.
doing thing.
Yeah. So it's great to hear that you're doing that.
Yeah. And frankly, we have a lot of fun when it comes to the doing. People really, really light up as, oh, great, I get my hands on it now. And it also hits home, though, that, when they heard it for the first time, it all sounded simple and easy, and we try to make it as simple as possible. It's probably the word that features most, when we look at the feedback we get from people. It's like, wow, you took something that for us had been very, very complicated, and you simplified it in a very nice way. But sometimes simple is one thing, but there's that old quote. How does it go? I wrote you a long letter because I didn't have time to write you a short one. It's doing simple is not always easy, and that's something that hits them. It's like, we thought we understood it when we heard it, but now that we've actually done it.
If you really think about it, usually the solution to like a big problem, when you get to the solution, you will be like, how I didn't think about it before. It's so simple. But the thing is, to get to this solution, that's the journey.
Yeah.
But then the solution is actually, it's common sense.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Until you get there.
I suppose a bit more common, but yeah, that is a lesson that I learned in the early part of my engineering career. I used, I started my career. I mean, I started in construction, but then moved to sort of engineering design, but in a sort of niche where technologies that we would call roughly fit in the realm of artificial intelligence, things like genetic algorithm optimization and artificial neural networks were being used to solve engineering problems, and I love that kind of thing. But and that was very much the selling point for our company, the company that I worked for. But the real beauty I felt in what we did, and this is something I learned over a few years, was we were very good at clarifying what the problem was. And if we got that bit right, the technology really didn't matter. You could almost solve the problem manually, and frankly, I found myself doing that many times. But if you got the problem specification right, and this is something so many people just don't bother to do, but we had to be able to do it to sort of plug it into an optimization model. If you got that right, gee, it made things so much better. And that's similar to what we're talking about in lean. If you understand the current state, you do the current state analysis thoroughly, the simple solution presents itself.
It's like say you just hit the nail on the head. You could have said more correct than you did. Companies, like what I see, they tend to jump into brainstorming, problem solving, but without really identifying the problem yet.
Yeah.
The problem statement.
Even worse, Pavel, and I'm sure you've seen this. We see this problem a lot because we deal with a lot of different regions, and there are some regions, like full respect for the clients that we work for in the Middle East, but a lot of inquiries that come out of the Middle East, for example, India as well, that they almost start out with the technology or the tool that they want to use. It's like, we want to implement Industry 4.7, or more recently, we want to apply AI to our operations management. And it's like, okay, well, let's back up. What is the issue and what is the problem? Let's be clear on that, and then we'll work out if we need some sort of tool. And
or we need
often we need a
ERP.
pencil and paper. It's like,
we need a different ERP system.
Yeah, geez. Yeah, I mean, you've seen it. Very rarely does what sits in the ERP system and what sits in reality match. And I mean, they have their place and they're very, very useful in some sense, but they are not an ERP in our thinking is not really a management system.
Software is an enabler. It's not the solution.
Yeah.
First, you need to have to do it with the basic tools, use what you have, optimize, and then you can start thinking, okay, do I need to elevate? Do I need to how can I increase my capacity if I tried everything? And everything
Exactly.
there is visual management in place, everything is working. Now it's time to elevate. Okay, maybe a software is maybe now I need something to make myself even better, but it's not the first thing.
And we have the luxury or the privilege, I guess, because we're going into factories over in Japan, and there's some that we've been into dozens and dozens of times over the past 15 years or so, and we get to see how these environments are evolving. But and it's not to say Toyota and others don't use technology where it makes sense. We have to make the distinction between technology for things like automation and technology for management, sort of two different topics, but and they will use technology for management as well. But what we see is almost always there's a year or two or three where they are using the analog method first or the manual method first. They perfect would be the wrong word, but they get it very, very good. And then they say, okay, now we might bring in the IT team now we might digitize this a little bit, but we understand it, it works. Okay. But and in many cases they decide actually analog is fine. It's better. Pencil and paper you can fix if it breaks down pretty easily, can't you? You're not calling for the IT team. You're not waiting 50 days. It's usually the sharpener. So, they know how to fix it. So,
So, so now I got to ask you about technology, AI, automation. In Florida, and I'm sure everywhere else in the world, big thing is Industry 4.0, automation, AI. So it's actually a huge topic here, if believe it or not. I mean, probably it's not a surprise, but huge topic for manufacturers is AI, automation. So what's your take on it? Where do you think AI takes us? What do you think about adapting automation? There is such slogans going here: if you don't automate, you're going to run out of business and things like that. So there is a big push. We got to automate. We got to increase productivity. It's almost like, it's okay. If I want to increase productivity, maybe I need to automate. So what's your take on it?
yeah.
I mean, I know we touched a little bit, but I still want to hear.
Sure. No, it's a great question, and certainly we're not against this movement. Again, just to clarify, where we fit in my thinking, is on the management side of things. So, there's AI and there's Industry 4.0. I mean, Industry 4.0 sort of lends itself more to management. Automation is quite broad. And that could be, as simple as a welding robot. That's sort of automation because it is safer, it is quicker, it is more accurate, and in the end it will cost us less and so forth. And these things, going back decades have made a lot of sense. And in fact, there's a lot of that around. But then there's the attaching sensors to everything. There's collecting data from everything. And then there's, analyzing it using whether it's AI or other technologies. So we've started to ask ourselves these questions, and probably 9 or 10 years ago, I started looking at that. My first attempt at that was to go and visit one of Hitachi's flagship plants in Japan. Hitachi actually make systems for Industry 4.0, so they have this factory of the future where they've implemented it all, and it was quite impressive. But what you need to remember, and not you, Pavel, because you know this painfully well, I'm sure, is that you can't jump to that step without getting the foundation right. And that is what we find ourselves working with our clients, doing, 95% of the time, is really getting that foundation in place. A little bit like the idea of get it right with pencil and paper, and then 3 years from now you can sort of digitize it. Things like you cannot skip the basic steps of setting up your environment through 5S and visual management, developing your people. That's a huge one, getting problem solving skills into the workforce. So many of the factories that we go to in Japan, and this sometimes shocks participants, are very, very analog. There was one that we took the group into on this tour this month, and it was sort of showcasing a little bit of this idea of, okay, how do we mix digitization with traditional approaches to manufacturing management? And the factory manager that met with us was very clear. He spent quite a bit of time on this idea of, first we have to be very clear on what it is we want to achieve, and then maybe one or two of these ideas come about. And for them, the big thing they needed, just given that they use a lot of molding machines and CNC machines, these can be quite expensive pieces of equipment. Equipment utilization was big for them. And so, digitization to help them track the real-time status and make decisions relating to how they were working with their equipment was a big thing. But then, they could have done a lot more in terms of digitization, but the way he described it was, we don't do Kaizen for the fun of it. We don't use these technologies for play. And so often we are going into, and again, I mentioned a couple of regions where this is quite common, where people see something fancy, some awesome technology, maybe they have some experience with it themselves, and they see that as a shortcut. But all they're doing is automating automating crap. Yeah, chaos. And it doesn't
I
work.
like how
So
you said, yeah, we don't do Kaizen for the fun of it. Because I heard of stories where one of the metrics of the management is you need to do 4 Kaizens a quarter or something like that, or 3 Kaizens a quarter. So it's almost like just doing Kaizen for the fun of it. So
if that's your KPI, it will drive you towards that. Now, there are companies that might do it well, and there might be companies that have a long list of issues that they've identified over time. And then, then it's okay, freeing up some time to work on these in a manner that makes sense. But if you're coming to work and you're just saying, okay, my KPI tells me I've got to do some Kaizen, what am I going to do? It's the wrong way to go about it. Yeah. And we're very clear to our clients that come over to Japan, because one of the risks is they come and, we do a Kanban simulation, for example. For those watching that haven't heard of Kanban, it's a very simple paper-based tool that helps you manage the flow of information and material throughout your environment, and within your supply chain. Little cards that get attached to containers or the items that move within your facility, and when they're released from these containers, when something is used, they become a production instruction, like an order form, and a really simple way to manage things. And one particular facility we go into, we go into great depth about how to implement, how it's used, how wonderful it is, and then we come out of that, and then we tell everyone, don't do it. And because the risk is people are coming and they're seeing all these great ideas and tools, and they if they're going to write down in their notebook, we need a Kanban system, they're missing the point. It's like, but what is going to improve in your facility by implementing Kanban? Well, we hadn't really considered it. Maybe inventory would be better. What's wrong with your inventory? Well, and they haven't clarified how much they've got, what the problem is, what the cost of that is. If we were to implement this, we could bring inventory down by this. We would remove the need for this number of managers. We wouldn't have to have people constantly going into a database to work out what they're doing. If they can be very clear about that, and they've got all the other prerequisites in place, which more often than not they don't. And, if they're dealing with repetitive manufacturing of very similar or the same item on a daily basis, maybe there's a need for it. But most of the 20,000 plus manufacturers that I think you represent in Florida are not in that situation. So it's like, that is really interesting to understand from the Toyota production system perspective. There are things in this that will be hints for things that you can do. Something like signal Kanban can be very, very useful if you understand the purpose of it. But, if you just come in and try and copy Toyota, it's going to be a mess. Don't do it. Yeah.
a tool, you got to know what is the right situation to use a tool. So it's funny you mentioned don't do it, because when I was doing a workshop, so we played a dice game. So in theory of constraints, basically it's a simulation, and you play and you actually roll dice, and the number of dice, it shows how many. It's basically how many pieces each workstation produces. So if you rolled snake eyes, and you're only moving 2 pieces, and it's like chips, like poker chips, so you're moving it. And basically we simulate different environments, different production environments, and one of them is where we have a constraint and the whole system is subordinated to the constraint. But then the funny thing is everybody's starting to write notes. Okay, well, I'm going to change my production. So I'm going to change my environment in my company. And then what we're saying is, PDCA, plan, do, check, act. So we're saying PDCA, please don't change anything.
I like it. Yeah.
Because like you said, you need to know what you're doing and why you're doing that.
Yeah. And look, that you yourself, you have experience as a consultant in the lean space and TOC and so forth, and obviously that's our role supporting companies. But one of the things we need to be very diligent about, although we could probably see several steps ahead, our job is to get them to the next step. And what is that next step? What is going to be appropriate? What will people come along for the ride? What would help remove some frustrations of the people actually working on the shop floor, and coming in and implementing some fancy tool that we've found in Japan, it's not the solution. So, you got to be a bit disciplined and,
Exactly. Discipline is a big word, and focus. That's another one. Eddie Goldard said, if in one word you're going to talk about theory of constraint, it's focus. If to explain TOC in one word.
yeah, I haven't read, so she put a new book out recently, I believe, on flow, right? Oh, sorry, did you say Elliot? No, not his daughter.
Ellie, yeah, Efrat, she released the Rules of Flow.
Yeah.
It's a very easy read, and it's a great book. So I would highly recommend to.
Yeah. No, I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. So, yeah.
Yep. And if you haven't read the article by Ellie Goldratt, Standing on the Shoulders of Good Giants,
No,
by
I haven't.
giants, he means giants of the industry. So one of them is Taiichi Ono, second of them is Edward Deming. And he said
There
he
you go.
created TOC standing on their shoulders. And he wrote
Yeah.
an article, I think it was about Hitachi tools. It's just 2 or 3 pages article, and how they implemented TOC in Hitachi tools.
Right. Oh, that's good. I know there has been some uptake of that, but and yeah, we tend to focus on things that have sort of evolved from the total production system and total quality management. So TOC and Six Sigma, frankly, are areas that we do not put ourselves forward as experts, but of course we need to be familiar with them. So, yeah.
But they really complement each other.
Hmm.
If you really think about it. So, Paul, I really enjoy our conversation. I think we covered a lot of ground. So, as far as, and I'm really appreciative that we are basically partners now. So, we here in a local manufacturing association on local MEP Center of Florida Makes for the state of Florida. We partners with Shinka Management. It's really looking forward for the next steps for our partnership. You have global presence. We are just solely focused on Florida. We are even smaller, Southwest. We're focusing on Southwest Florida. However, I think the impact can be really significant for our clients over here. And looking forward for what's next to our partnership. I'm very happy that we were able to sign the first company. Member of SRMA to the tour, and what do you think? What do you think is the next steps for us?
Yeah. Well, firstly, thank you. It's a big privilege for us as well. And if we, what's the population of Florida? It'd be in the sort of 25 million or something, I'm guessing. Yeah. But the population of Australia as a country it's like 26 or 27 million. So from our perspective, we're sort of equals here in terms of size.
I gotta say another thing. Florida's economy, I think it's close to top 10 in the world. Our economy.
That's right.
Maybe
Well,
15, but we want to get to the top 10. That's one of our goals. We also want to be number 3 manufacturing state in the country. Right now, we actually just surpassed New York as a manufacturing state, Florida. So we jumped from 15 10 years ago, and now we are number 10.
Yeah. Well, for us to have a relationship with a manufacturing state like that is huge. It's what we, it's what we set out to do, and we're all about helping companies around the world to adopt. In our case, it's Japanese management practices to help them improve their productivity and quality. And Florida Makes, SRMA, and the other manufacturers associations, a big theme, and I suspect part of the mission is productivity is there. So for us to have that sort of relationship, that's wonderful for us. So where we'd like to go from here? Well, we've had a couple of your members join us. Of course, we'd like to be able to extend that to others. We do run the Lean Japan Tour program several times a year. It's an open registration program. So, you can send one person from your company, you can send several, just hop on our website and have a look at the dates. But if as this evolves, I would hope that we go beyond, say, having a discussion through the internet, and we come over and do some things live in Florida as well. I don't know if you have
Yeah, that would be
annual
great.
gatherings. To be part of that would be a real honor. Let's see where we take it.
Yeah, so the next one we'll do in person, either in Australia or more likely Japan or even more likely Florida, right?
Fantastic. We've
That
got
would be
options.
nice. I think all of them are really good options.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Paul, and looking forward for our partnership
No,
to
thank
continue
you,
to
and
grow and evolve.
appreciate it. Yeah. And if I may just close with a compliment, Pavel, I can see through LinkedIn and other sort of channels how much effort you have been putting into these types of interactions with there's with industry leaders, thought leaders, the manufacturers themselves. I'm very fortunate to sort of have a chance to talk to you as well. And you reached out to me 3 or 4 days ago actually, and just said, "Oh, let's do this," and bang, 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 you got it done. A lot of others would spend 2 or 3 months thinking about it. So, if you don't mind me saying, I'm very impressed with your level of efficiency and productivity in terms of what you're doing for Florida Makes, amongst the many different hats that you many different roles that you have or hats that you wear. It's awesome. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul, as well for being able to schedule it so quickly. It really worked out really well, especially with our time difference. I mean, how many hours we said? 12? Something about that.
Yeah, I imagine you're getting ready for for bed. So
Yeah, it's getting 9 p.m. It was a long day.
yeah.
Okay, thank you, Paul.